It's always they're just friends.
They're just friends.
They're just friends.
The dreaded sentence, they're just friends. And did you
Yeah.
find that they often were just friends?
No.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of UnCoupling, where we destigmatize breakups and we move through them with self-empowerment. This week we have Olivia Hawkins on the program.
Hello, everyone.
You guys might know her from the hit show Love Island, season 9 contestant. She's also an actress, a dancer, an influencer, and we are so excited that she is going to get down and candid with us about destigmatizing breakups and the fact that, Olivia, we talk on our program about how on an Instagram feed, for instance, we're very vulnerable with social media these days. However, there's the boyfriend or the girlfriend, and all of a sudden it's just blank and there's no explanation. And we think that's because we're conditioned to think something's that's ending is a failure. And that's not necessarily the case. It can always be a blessing and a pivot in a new direction. And you can take a lot of lessons from people that are no longer in your life. It doesn't mean that you haven't learned something. So we like to break that down on this podcast. So thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you for having me.
Now, what is your current relationship status?
So I'm currently very, very single.
Very, very single.
Emphasis on the very. But do you know what? I'm actually happy. I'm 28. I'm very comfortable being by myself. I've never been in a labelled relationship, so I've never actually called anyone my boyfriend.
Wow, really?
I know, yeah. It's actually quite crazy.
So on Love Island, forgive me, because there is a massive following in the States. But I have not seen it. And my manager has seen it. A few of our producers on the show have seen it. So they're all really excited. Will you, for the listeners that are not familiar with Love Island, will you give a breakdown of what that was?
Yeah, what, just Love Island in general or my season?
And your role on the season,
So my role in the season, so I was an original cast member, so I went in from day one. I was there for 7.5 weeks. I went through about 6 couples in there. I think I went through the most. But for me in there, I really, I couldn't fake anything. If something wasn't serving me or wasn't, working for me, I just moved on to something new. I couldn't really force it. And I think in that environment, it is really easy to just settle. And even on the outside, I think people settle quite easily. But I had a tough time in there.
That's interesting. You say you've never had a boyfriend, and then on the show, there was this odd metaphor that I'm seeing right away of you don't want to settle, and that there's absolutely everything that you should pay attention to about not suiting up for something that's not you.
Yeah, and I think also I always say, like, don't lower your standards just for the sake of being in a relationship. Be comfortable being by yourself, and then if you meet someone, great. But if it's not working out, don't force it.
So never having a boyfriend, would you call them situationships then of what you've been through? Like, when did you first start dating, or when was your first breakup or your first situation breakup?
So I had quite a long situationship. I had 2 back to back, and one of them was like 2 years, and then the second one was like almost 3 years.
And what do you think?
I should have learned from the first one.
Well, what made you not want to feel exclusively committed to the first situationship that was 2 years?
Do you know what? I think it almost got past a point where it was too far to be like, what are we? When you have that conversation of, are we together? And I think I became really comfortable with acting as if we were kind of in a relationship, but we weren't. And it just almost got too far in. And
to address.
Yeah, to address it. But I'd met their family, I'd go out with their friends, and it would be everything that a relationship is, just without calling them my boyfriend, which is just crazy.
The introductions into the family, was this is Olivia, or this is my friend Olivia?
I think it was more, this is my friend.
My friend Olivia.
Yeah, but looking back now, I probably shouldn't have been okay with that, but I just went with it. But I was a lot younger then. I think now I'm not as naive.
Do you think there's any technological advancements, like i.e. social media, or like you said, your age, that pushed you into that situation subconsciously, or is it something that at the time, being that young, you chose to do?
I think it did. Age definitely did have a part to play in it. I think naivety. But I always say social media is like the root of all evil. I think it, right? It causes so many issues for me with situations, where guys are following girls and liking
Mm,
photos. And I know it might seem so small and minuscule to them, but I think for us women, it's quite a big deal when you're dating someone because it's almost like they're still seeking from other people.
yeah. Yeah. How did you manage when you were in those situationships when people would be following others that you made you uncomfortable?
I really didn't like it, and I think because I wouldn't do it myself, and when I'm
Mm,
involved with someone, I do tend to give like 100% of me to that one person, and I've always been like that. If I really like someone, I'll just focus on them. I don't want to speak to multiple other people, so I would bring it up in conversation, but in the past, it's been, oh, they're just friends. It's always they're just friends.
they're just friends.
They're
The
just
the the
friends.
dreaded sentence, they're just friends. And did you
Yeah.
find that they often were just friends?
No.
Never really. So there was
In
infidelity around the situationship
Um, yeah, as such,
or
I'd say majority of
emotional.
them. Yeah, majority of them weren't friends. They were, people they'd met on nights out or
Mm,
people that they'd spoken to before. But I think, as women, we have like such a gut instinct. And I always think when
right.
you have that feeling inside you and you just know, I always go with it.
Mhm. Mhm. And would you say what's the worst kind of breakup, either from a relationship or a situationship that you found in your experience?
Do you know what? Recently, I actually experienced being ghosted.
Ah, yes.
So that for me was just because there was no closure to it. It was just kind of like they just disappeared. And then it kind of leaves you feeling, oh gosh, have I done something wrong? And then it's
Right.
like, no, I haven't. Don't blame it on yourself. But it's so
Right.
easy to do that.
And how long were you with this person before the ghosting occurred?
You know what? I was only speaking to them for about a month or so, but it was
Mm,
like regular FaceTimes and we hadn't even got to the point of going on a date, which sounds wild, but I think it's more like you're invested in your imagination and you picture it and you build it up to something. And then I think when it doesn't happen, it's almost the unknown.
yeah. It's the silent treatment that are some of the
Yeah.
worst. There's because there's no closure,
Yeah,
I
no
think.
closure. And I just
Yeah.
think in this day and age, it's almost become really normalized, like ghosting.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know if it's this generation. I always say I should have been born in the 1920s because
Where
I'm so
courtship was a
traditional.
thing.
When
Yeah.
courtship was a thing, my granddad couldn't have access to my grandma. He'd go and knock on the door and ask to
Right.
take her out with her parents. So nowadays it's like, it's so easy for guys. They can just message you on Instagram and there's no courting. It's not as traditional and it's such a shame, but I don't know where that started from.
I think it's the effort is a lot more minimal initially invested. Like you said,
Yeah.
guys don't have to walk up to the door and ask parents permissions to take their daughters out
Yeah.
anymore. So
Yeah.
10 seconds of not even 10 seconds, 2 seconds of a, hey, what's up,
Yeah.
is the walking to the door now.
Yeah, and it's like
Yeah.
almost the
Yeah.
bare minimum, flowers or like opening the door when you get out of the car, but then because I feel like chivalry's a bit dead at the moment, it kind of then you feel like, oh, this is really nice, but really that's just the bare minimum.
Ghosting is something that I haven't talked about on this program, and I think it's really important to address because an aspect of uncoupling, there are so many different types of ghosting. Like you
Mm,
said, there's ones where you haven't been on a date like you guys, but the lead up of the emotional vulnerability and slowly opening up to something
yeah.
before a first date can
Mhm.
almost feel more intimidating because there was so much verbal and emotional communication, essentially. I don't know if we would call it attachment, but you're building such a slow, organic attachment that it
Yeah.
almost felt more invasive to not get back to you.
Yeah, for sure. And then you have like an idea of this person in your head, and you start to like think of
Mm.
like the future of like when you're going to meet them, and then it's like just shut that book, and it's like, oh, there's just no answers. And I think it's almost just such a cowardly thing to just not, say I'm not feeling it, or I'm talking to someone else. I think people would appreciate that so much more than just not getting a response.
And it's a good topic to bring up of how many times as the receiver do you reach out and say, were they busy? How much self-doubt or questioning do you put into to this relationship, essentially,
Yeah.
before you have to say, okay, this is like a ghosting, essentially.
Yeah, I think I
Yeah.
always give someone the benefit of the doubt. I am quite forgiving. So I'd see what their excuse is. If it's sorry, I've just been busy, I'll probably reply, who is this? you know? But if obviously everyone has lives,
New
everyone
phone.
goes through things. So I do give people a chance, but I think, yeah, I don't think that can run really.
Mm, mm. And so how many times did you reach out before you said, okay, this is exactly what I'm thinking this is?
So I didn't reach out after the fun. So we were supposed to have the date,
Mm-hmm.
and then he never contacted on the day, and then I think he messaged like a week later. So then I just, if you don't hear on the day of the date, you're like, it's not happening.
Yeah. So wait, so he planned the date. You guys
Yeah,
both planned the date, and then he essentially didn't confirm,
yeah,
i.e., subconsciously standing you up. Well, consciously, but
yeah, pretty much.
that's wow. And
And
so a
then
week later, he contacted you.
yeah, and just said sorry, I've been really busy.
Who's
And
new phone? Who's this?
yeah, and I just said, who
Yeah.
who is this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so at that point, he did come back around cowardly with the tail between his legs.
yeah,
But uh, hopefully, how long did it take you to feel vindicated? Is not the right word, but that you dodged a bullet, that you could recognize past the hurt
mhm.
of being stood up and your time being wasted. How long did it take you to feel, wow, I really dodged a bullet? This could have been 6 months in, and he could have
Yeah.
emotionally pulled the same kind of shenanigan.
I think that's the point there. I think it was a few days because I kind of thought, well, thank goodness he's done it now rather than later on when I've invested more time and more energy into this person. And I almost twisted my thoughts and said this
Mm.
is a blessing. Because I think if I'd have really got myself down, then that's not a good way to go.
I think it's the hardest lesson we have to learn in a coupling, regardless. There's different, I get grieving periods. If it's 3 years and someone ghosts you, or I've heard the stories where they come home to the apartment or the house and everything's cleared out. I mean,
Oh,
really deep betrayals, but
yeah,
I think it's the same motions, just maybe longer grieving processes, depending on the time that you guys have dated
yeah,
or have been talking. But
hmm,
ghosting is something that I absolutely believe for our listeners prolongs a
hmm,
grieving, getting over a recovery period before, because you're going through the initial shock. It's not
yeah,
just hurt, it's the shock of it,
yeah.
which can cloud the grieving process, essentially.
Yeah, and you go through so many different emotions. At first, you're like upset, and then you're angry, and then you blame yourself, and then you blame them, and it's just a whirlwind. I can't even imagine someone ghosting after like years, like an actual relationship. That's wild.
The emotional intelligence of people can be really damaging to
Yeah,
partners
yeah,
when there's the stonewalling, essentially. It's
hmm,
it's worse than silent treatment.
yeah,
But yeah, silent. It's the, like you said, it's the distance. It's the absence that
hmm,
makes it even eerier.
yeah.
Uh, yeah,
But
yeah.
I always find, don't you find they always come back every time? Whether it's like a week or a month or a year, they always find their way back.
I
And
have
I
had a couple guys like that will message like a year later, and you're like,
Yeah.
how am I still in the mix? How is this a
I'm,
thing?
I'm just like,
Yeah.
how does it even pop up in their mind that they think that they can just message like that?
I unfortunately think there is a time gap in their brains. I think
Yeah.
it's called time blindness, is what it's called,
Yeah.
and it's a term that ADHD diagnoses will use for their patients for ADHD, that they'll have time blindness, where they can sit and look at a wall for 8 hours, or look up and say, "How did I only get 2 things done today?" And it's been 10 hours.
Yeah.
And so I do believe there's something about time blindness with, and it could be women too, with people that don't really understand that a year has passed. They can't
Hmm.
emotionally process that.
Yeah.
So there's something, I think, more at hand than just emotional intelligence. I think there's genuinely it's either depression, or it's a distraction in their life that will feel the lack of time passing. They don't
Yeah.
feel it.
There's
And
definitely
so they
more.
think they're justified just to text you out of the blue, and they don't see the disrespect
Yeah.
out of that.
And
Yeah.
it's almost like they do it when you've just got over it as well,
Mm,
isn't it? The
they know.
timing. They know. It's like they have a clock for you. And they're
Yeah.
like, oh, she must be over it. Let me just say a WhatsApp.
Is there somebody that you go to when, thankfully, hopefully that's your only ghosting experience.
Yeah.
But when situationships end,
Hmm.
is there somebody that you've gone to, who do you go to? Your parents, your friends? What's your process like in uncoupling?
I've got really close friends and we talk about everything, which is great. So I've got a great support network.
Mm,
And they'll already know about the situation. You know what you're like with your girlfriends when you're messaging. They'll already know. They'll have the screenshots
yeah.
of the conversations
They're
as
already
it
seeing it
proceeds.
coming.
Yeah, they've seen the whole thing coming. So yeah, I definitely talk about it with my friends. But as bad as it sounds, like a lot of people have been through it.
Yeah. Ghosting is something that I don't think is talked about enough on a serious level. I think we all
Yeah,
make jokes about it, and
yeah.
they're memes, but the
TikTok.
psychological, yeah, the TikTok,
Yeah.
memes about ghosting, but I find I think the computer is a huge aid in that as
Hmm.
well. It's something
Yeah.
to hide behind, the phone you can hide behind.
Yeah.
Um, I actually was set up on a first date, but I was
Really?
already at the restaurant. Um,
Oh no.
and a prolonging of the time. I don't think it was a month. I think it was only a couple weeks,
Yeah.
but we had a lot in common. And so I got to the restaurant, and it was a restaurant that I had been wanting to go to for a while. And I sat at the bar,
Yeah.
and I just realized, like you said, when you hadn't, he did confirm that day. But I realized when he was so late, I didn't even text him, I don't think. I was like, "I'm ordering, I'm gonna do my thing, talk
Yeah.
to the bartenders." I travel a lot by myself, so eating alone at bars does not bother me. I
Amazing.
found it more funny than anything else, and
Yeah.
slightly mourning this idea of like, "Wow, we had a lot in common."
Hmm.
So that's interesting to me that he wouldn't show up, but he ends up FaceTiming me saying, "Oh my gosh, I forgot." And I didn't answer the FaceTime. So he starts texting me after the FaceTime in the middle of dinner saying,
Yeah.
"I'm so sorry. I forgot the time. I completely slipped my mind. He was a bag maker. He was a new company for him. And so
Right.
he said, "Do you want to FaceTime me and watch me make bags?" Because I'd already missed the first FaceTime. I
No.
I just FaceTimed you. I'm so sorry I missed it. Lost track of time. Do you want me to FaceTime you so you can watch me make bags? And
I'd have replied saying your replacement's already on the way, but thank you for the thank you. That's
was
wild.
it was wild. And I was like, "Who is this guy?" But at the same time, I paused and I said, "Holland, this man is such a demented man, and you really have to feel really sorry for
Yeah.
him." And I think he did end up texting a few months later, like you said.
Yeah.
Um, and it blows my mind. I laugh, but I don't mean to laugh, because he's got a real sickness and it's
Mm.
gonna really hurt him.
Karma.
Hopefully, Yeah, yeah. So, needless to say, I did not get on the phone and watch him make bags.
I can't
Um,
believe he said
no.
that. That's just,
Yeah. Yeah, he
oh
like how I
God.
guess he hand makes bags. I was like, "No, I'm
I'm
not in
good.
the
I'm
mood for a
enjoying
knit
my own
yeah.
dinner.
I don't
Thank
need a
you.
knitting lesson tonight. I'm good. Thank you. I will take it from an 80-year-old woman if I want one,
I
you
think
know.
their
Yeah.
excuses are just crazy sometimes, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah. So there's different kinds of ghosting. Like you said, there's the ones that don't confirm on the day. There's the
Yeah.
ones that just never get back to you.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's interesting the one night stands that'll never get back to you versus the emotional lead up like you had was
Yeah.
in a weird way almost more personal because it was based off of personality and closeness, but
Hmm.
knowing that, like you said, that it's really more their problem and taking a few days to grieve is okay when they're when you're
Yeah.
ghosted to
Oh,
have the
for
shock wear
sure.
off before
Yeah,
you
you have to
realize.
sit in your emotions and feel it for sure. I think you can't just like think, oh, on to the next, you need to
Mhm.
feel it. Otherwise,
Yeah.
there'll be that build up inside you and then it'll come out eventually.
Well, I'm glad you only had a few days of coming to that realization of wow, that was really a blessing in disguise that I didn't even have to waste one dinner, face one FaceTime with him,
Yeah,
face
I
to
think
face.
I'm happy. I'm not happy it happened, but I'm happier it happened now. I think if it had happened a few years ago, it would have affected me a lot more.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now
So
I'm
what
at a
did
place where I'm very independent and I'm very okay. I don't need you, so
do
move
you
on.
feel do you feel like you're looking for a relationship now or are you actively not looking for a relationship?
I'd say I'm actively not looking, but I'm not like completely against it. I think
Mm,
whatever, if it comes to me, it comes to me great. But I feel like when I go out looking, it doesn't happen because you
right.
put too much pressure on it. And I think, yeah, what's meant to be will be. And
Do you
hopefully I
th-
might meet someone.
do you think being on a reality dating show has changed your view of dating and looking for relationships? Did it accelerate your self-worth? Did it hurt your self-worth? What was your experience with having that on TV dating experience to now dating in real life?
Do you know what? I actually say I feel like it's made my dating life harder.
Mm,
For sure. Obviously people's intentions and stuff, but I've definitely come out stronger from it and knowing what I want and what I won't settle for now.
mm.
And I'm probably a bit more cutthroat, but there's nothing wrong in that, I think. If you know your worth and you know what you want, then don't settle for any less.
Is there an example of something you would have put up with before the show and now you're like, "Oh, I see this a mile away." Absolutely not.
Just multiple red flags, in the beginning of talking to someone, and they'll do a few things, and you think, I'm not sure about this.
Mhm.
Taking like a day to reply or like
Right.
things like that. I think now I'm a bit lenient, like maybe like the first two times, but then after that, I'll just say, look, communication's really key for me. If you can't fulfill that, then it's not going to work out.
Right. And I also feel like if sometimes you legitimately are really busy if you're trying
Yeah, of
to if
course.
you're an entrepreneur and you've got 3 deals going on and then you've
Yeah,
got birthday parties and trips with friends or family obligations and it does take you a legitimate day to get back and you have that sort of like head smack of like, "Oh god, how did I saw the text, I meant to reply, I didn't
yeah,
reply."
yeah.
And that happens more than like you said a couple times.
Hmm.
You don't have time to date. That's
No,
okay.
yeah,
But
it's fine.
it's you just you might have actually really liked that girl if the timing was right, but you just don't have time to date.
Yeah, and I
That's that
always think
simple.
it's sometimes right person, wrong timing as well,
Mm. Which
for
is
sure.
okay. It
Yeah.
sucks, but that's part of life. Like sucking is part of life. It's
No, it
okay.
is. It really is.
Yeah.
It's all part of it. But
Yeah.
yeah, communication's really key for me. And I think if you're
Okay.
busy, I'll always say, look, I'm really busy with work. I'm gonna be off my phone for a few hours, but I'll promise I'll reply when I can. And I think that's all we need. And men as well. We just need that reassurance. But I don't think in the start of a relationship that you should be texting 24/7 because for me it's just not feasible to keep that up. And I think then when the communication drops and the texts get less and, the
Mm.
excitement kind of drops a little bit, then people are like, oh no, they're not replying to me straight away. They've taken hours. And I think if you start from the get go, maybe just saying, oh, we'll catch up after work, we'll have a FaceTime. rather
Right.
than texting every 5 minutes.
Planning when you could speak and then
Yeah,
planning a face-to-face date if that's
yeah.
feasible.
Yeah, and then you
Mhm.
speak on a Tuesday and you know you're going to see them on the Thursday. So you don't need to speak the Wednesday because you know you're going to see them. Hopefully they turn up. And
Right.
then, you're sorted. But I think that's the big thing as well. It's just over communicating as well in the beginning.
Earning the overshare is yeah, organically growing and not rushing.
Yeah, and I think like running out of things to say. There's only so many times you can say, "How are you? How's your day? What are you up to?" Um, Yeah, I think for me that definitely in future relationships I won't communicate as much in the beginning. Whereas when I was younger,
Mm,
I used to want to text all the time and call and just like you just want you're obsessed with that person, aren't you? So you just want to talk to them
right.
all the time. But sometimes it's not the best thing to do.
A therapist that I really admire says when the lust and, like you said, the urge to just overshare, the urge to just text 24/7,
Hmm.
that's lust, and that's what 16-year-olds do. But grown women know there's a time and a place to grow organically, and to love is so many things. Love is timing. We're taught love is everything, and if you love someone, make it work. As children, but when we
Yeah,
grow up, it's a lot more logistical, not quite as romantic,
yeah,
and but that's okay for a long term, organically grown at a decent pace. I
yeah,
feel like that's
sure,
important to note when.
yeah.
So right now, are you in the season of dating yourself and dating your friends and enjoying your family time? Is that
Yeah,
what you
I'm
come out on the other
definitely.
side of situationships?
Yeah, my focus is like on my family and like my friends going out for dinners and just I'm so busy with work as well. Like I just don't almost have I want to give someone my everything and I don't feel like I can really do that at the moment. But then I think if I did meet the right person, I would just make it work. So I
Mm.
obviously haven't met the right person
So
yet.
what are you looking for in a relationship when you will be looking for one? Is there
Um,
communication?
yeah, communication is so key for me. Loyalty, of course. Just banter, someone that's funny. I feel like, life can be so serious sometimes. It's nice to just
Mm,
have someone that you can unwind with and not take it so seriously. But then they also have that sweet side to them where you can have those deep chats and it's not always taking the mickey out of each other. And someone who's very family orientated as well, for
okay.
sure.
So family's on the horizon as well.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that
definitely.
just does it for I think situationships and ghosting are really important, and I just appreciate you bringing those
Mhm.
up and uh,
Yeah,
destigmatizing them, because there's nothing wrong with admitting that you've never had a boyfriend, or
yeah.
um, I think especially with people in their late 20s,
Mhm.
I do you think that that's something that's more common than people in their 30s and 40s, that situationships are more prevalent these days?
Yeah, for sure. And do you know what? I used to feel really embarrassed telling people that I'd never had a relationship because I always worried they'd think, oh, there must be something wrong with her.
Mm.
I'd start off the sentence with, I've never been in a relationship, but I promise there's nothing wrong with me. And now I'm like, I've never been in a relationship because it hasn't worked out, timing, and I just don't, I'm 28, I'm still young.
Mhm.
I've had situations. It's not like I haven't dated. I've just never had that label. But I
Yeah.
think we need to just scrap the whole situationship.
I think the first step in scrapping situationships is,
Yeah.
like you said, communication is key,
Yeah.
and having enough self-worth as the man or a woman
Mhm.
saying, "This is what I want, if you want something different." And if enough of those questions are asked,
Mhm.
and the people that are looking for situationships, they're running into so many dead ends because everybody is holding them accountable.
Yeah.
They're going to have a harder time avoiding the fact that they'd have to admit that's what they're looking for,
Mhm.
and not putting on a costume and pretending it's Halloween and saying, "Oh, I'm looking for something else," and looking like they're not the walking, quacking duck. If that's what you are, you need to admit that's what you are.
Yeah,
And
and
there's,
like go into something and say, look, I'm not looking for anything serious. It's just a bit of fun.
mm,
If it turns into something, great. But at least then you know what page you're on, and you can either
exactly.
agree to it or not, and then it's up to you.
Mm. Yeah, I think destigmatizing the situationships and, like you said, admitting that you've run into them, and there's no shame in admitting
Yeah.
that situationships is just another chapter in self growth, and
Yeah.
realizing you didn't want to be in them but you found yourself in them is such a huge key.
Yeah, and really a massive point is just don't blame yourself. It's so
Hmm.
easily done, and think, what did I say something wrong? Did I do something wrong? It's not you, it's them.
Right.
You can't blame yourself in these
Mm.
situations. It just is what it is, and you just got to move on. There's billions of people in the world. You'll find someone for you. Um, we always end up getting over it anyway. You always think, oh, this is the end of the world, but if you remember the last situation you were heartbroken over, you don't even think about it today.
Hmm. Mm. Have you ever read Artist's Way by Julie Cameron?
No.
It's a book about dating yourself.
Okay.
And so it takes you like a step-by-step process,
Yeah.
where you take yourself out on dates and you journal
Mm.
about certain prompts. So I
Yeah.
highly recommend to everybody, artists. So I have friends that have done it a couple times in their life, going
Yeah.
through the book. But
Yeah.
the Artist's Way, it's technically for artists,
Hmm.
but it can be for absolutely anybody. So this could help in your professional as well as personal life.
Oh, I'm definitely
Yeah,
going to check that out. Yeah, you'll have to
yeah.
send it to me.
Lovely. Well, our next segment is going to be a lightning round,
Cool.
and it's going to be either one word or one sentence answers, whatever first comes to you.
Okay.
So, when was your first breakup?
Oh, technically never.
Technically, never. That's
Yeah.
technically true. Right. And who was your first crush?
Childhood school sweetheart.
Do you remember how old you were?
16.
16?
Yeah.
Oh. And then, what is your model relationship?
My mum.
And then, what is your breakup movie?
What's the one that's 10 things I hate about you?
About you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There's that one. That's a
Yeah.
fun one. And what is your breakup song or band?
Oh, I do have heartbreak mixes on my Spotify, but I love, Lewis Capaldi.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, Louis Capaldi, yeah.
yeah.
And what is your breakup food or stress food?
Oh, chocolate.
Chocolate. You
Yeah.
guys have the best chocolate. Oh, those twirls. I'll never get over
You
them.
love? Oh, good.
The twirls. They're so random, but the twirls. First thing you do after a breakup or a situationship breakup.
Um, Rant to my friends and play sad music.
What is your number one red flag in a relationship or potential relationship?
Bad communication.
Mm. And your number one green flag in a relationship or potential relationship?
Um, Communication.
Communication. And what is a fun quirk of yours that your partners in the past have loved?
I'm a bit nerdy. This is really embarrassing. I used to like plane spot a little bit.
What's
I had
that?
a I had a plane radar app, so I'd like spot where
Ah!
planes were going. And when I was on holiday, I'd do it with my brother, and we'd guess where the plane was coming from.
Oh, that's lovely. That's so lovely. I love
Yeah,
that.
a little bit
I love
nerdy.
that. Yeah, there's apps that will show how many runways an airport has, so you can
Yeah,
see the lineup behind you if
yeah,
you have the radar. Yeah, it's quite fun.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And our last segment is words of wisdom.
Yeah.
And at the end of all of our interviews, we'd like to ask you guys any guidance you would give any of our listeners going through an uncoupling, whether that be a situationship, whether they've just been ghosted,
Mhm.
or a long-term relationship. What is the guidance you would give?
The guidance I would give is, if you've just come out of a situation or you're going through heartbreak, almost turn it into a blessing, and what's ever meant to be for you, it will be for you. And if it's not, then it's just a lesson, and you just got to move forward and focus on yourself.
Mm. Thank you so much. It was,
Thank you.
I absolutely think people are going to take so many things away from situationships, and ghosting especially are such particular gut wrenching experiences. So the
Yeah,
fact that you've been so honest about it is is really helpful.
Yeah, and as you said, social media is like, we make light-hearted jokes about it, but it really is deep.
They're going to come out better on the other side with your advice, so I
Oh,
appreciate
for
it.
sure. And you
Yeah.
guys, you can get through anything. So each day at a time.
Oh, I'm your host, Holland Roden. Don't forget to subscribe to UnCoupling and sign up for our exclusive Patreon member. We're going to see you next time. Thank you so much, Olivia, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
UnCoupling Podcast is produced by Stampede Ventures, Jason R. Ellis, and Holland Roden.